Hello strangers, you back again? Well, today we're going to be talking about the creepy Teletubby story. So, I thought it'd be a great idea to talk about this, why I actually make myself into a Teletubby. Of course, not a normal Teletubby. I'm going to change myself into Gothy Woffy, the goth version of a Teletubby. So let's find out how that goes. This is going to be so fun. Today I thought it'd be very interesting to hear about the Teletubby Theory. Have you heard of this theory? Well, it's a long story and I'll tell you all about it. So listen if you want to be scared. Have you ever heard about the Teletubby Theory? Well, it's very, very creepy and scary. Everyone knows about the Teletubbies. Yes, some annoying children's program. But some people think that it's actually based on an institute for the mentally disabled children in Bulgaria. Its nickname was the La La Land. There the children were locked away in a cold, dark, empty rooms with no stimulation. They'd walk backwards and forwards and no one cared for them and they didn't have any food. They just were forgotten. Apparently, the Teletubbies are based on a group of children who all died the same day in the most worst way possible. She had a face that was deformed, but made her face look stretched in the shape of a smile. She was locked in a cold, damp room and isolated for 5 years of her life. Her mind had completely gone. She danced around the room with no music. She couldn't speak a word of Bulgarian, but always mumbled in a strange, gibberish way. She spent her entire life locked away, and her skin had turned yellow from a lack of sunlight. But she was always just smiling and smiling. Carers decided to break her leg so she couldn't dance anymore. Even when they kept her tied up in bed, she would just smile and mumble. Apparently this girl was the inspiration for Lala. Sad. Another one was a small boy. He was only 7 during the time. He, like the others, would walk backwards and forwards. He was locked in the institute his whole life. He was a troubled child and would often whack his head against a wall so hard that the stone would chip off, because the carers would often lock him outside, tied to the fences. He was left there so often, he got frostbite. His limbs turned blue from the ice from outside. But he and Lala had something in common. Yet both of them smiled all the time. Smiling. Always smiling. Next was another little boy. He was deformed at birth. Just like the other two, he was also unable to speak. He was simply just never taught. This is a very sickly child. He was always throwing up the food he was given, and he spent most of the time face down in his own vomit. He was always sick, and he was a poor boy, very miserable. The poor boy spent many years just being this sick little boy, and that was the inspiration for Dipsy. The last was a little girl, possibly the most tragic. She spent her entire life locked away in the institute the moment she was born. Her parents were horrified at her. She had a shockingly deformed face when she was born, and a creepy smile that damned her to a life of pain. She fell asleep near the logs of fire at night. The drunken carers threw her onto the fire. Her skin was melted. She screamed for help and the carers pulled her out. The damage was already done. It was a miracle she survived. But she smiled. This is the Teletubby for Poe. Let's find out why they were called the Teletubbies. You see, in their dark, hopeless existence, there was something the children liked, not just like, but obsessed over. It was their whole life. The only thing they deemed to live for. And this thing was a television. Or rather televisions that played through the institute. As a way to keep the attention of disabled and deformed children that lived within the stone walls. But one day, the 4 children heard the director say that they're going to take the TVs away. That scared them, as you can imagine. That's the only thing they had. The electric for the televisions was getting too expensive. Get rid of them, the director said. Completely unaware that the smiling children looking at her could in fact understand what she was saying, despite them never being able to speak themselves. The children looked at each other with panicked faces. What would they do without this magical music playing box that gave them kind words and light and something to do? Then the other children, rocking backwards and forth, wordlessly formed a plan together. They would hide the televisions. Somehow, they just had to. They just had to. That night, the carers had left. They got out of their cots. All the children slept in the same room, locked inside a long concrete tunnel with no windows. The only difference between day and night for the children was that the carers weren't there. Ignoring the hums and cries of other children, the 4 children slowly pulled the 4 televisions on the shelf. Now all they had to do was hide the magic TVs. But the problem was, there was nowhere to hide them. The children looked at each other, distressed and very scared. Of course, the only way the children could ever hide something from the other bigger, stronger children was within. They had done it before by swallowing little toys and then puking them up for later. The TVs were only small enough to fit inside their stomach, but they're still too big to eat. What would they do? The next day, the horrific sight met the carers in the room. Stench of blood. The children were crying and moaning, as usual, but before, in the middle of the room, had each clawed into their own stomachs, their guts all over the floor, all covered in blood. And apparently that's how we get our lovely Teletubbies and the whole story of the 4 Teletubbies we know today are from these poor children. I hope you enjoy listening to this little mini story of the theory of the Teletubbies. Of course, you know I find this stuff very interesting, and I thought you guys might enjoy it as well. So, this is making lots of noise in my video, and he's, don't do that, and you're irritating, aren't you? Yes, that's Dexter, that's my husband's cat. He's a beast. Okay.
Coffee, waffy. Halloween. Coffee, waffy, love Halloween. Love Halloween. Bye bye. Bye bye.